What's so game changer about adding psychedelics to your processing is that it really helps you to get deep into the somatic aspects of your healing and your growth and all of that in terms of being able to really, what psychedelics do, and we've had quite a few experts on our show that have talked about this in terms of the science, but it helps our protector parts to go down. It helps to disarm some of those parts of our personality that are run by our ego that might be preventing us from being able to actually work with some of those darker, denser energies that can obstruct our growth, right? And can constrict our cognitive capacity to make new choice. And I think that's what's so powerful for me when I'm working with these medicines is that it really helps me get beyond the protective parts and into these exiled parts of my experience that unlock so much when I'm able to transmute those energies somatically in my body. I think, that's where all those resources really start to open up.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And we are back, Miss Tracey and I, for our first solo pod post Costa Rica. That's right. You can sort of tell from the little bit of tan that's left on our skin here. We were just joking about is hanging on for dear life. But certainly you can tell from our sunny dispositions and how light and expansive and energized we're feeling coming down off the top of that mountain. And we promised our folks that we would circle back around and we would share some of what we experienced at this retreat that we attended, this conscious leadership retreat at the start of this year. So Tracey, how are you feeling? We're 2 weeks post-retreat now in real time. And let's just start there. Let's just plug into how you're feeling 2 weeks out.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest benefits and probably one of my favorite parts after the retreat is that post kind of feeling that we get for the next 8 to 10 weeks that we can talk about a bit. But I feel great. Open-hearted, open to possibilities, creative, high frequency, all the favorite things that we love after that kind of work that we do. So I'm feeling good. I feel good. I'm feeling in flow and, looking at, kind of working on some stuff around what I can change in terms of habits, which is part of the work that comes after, those kind of retreats is like, where do you want to change and how do you want to show up in different ways and what little things can you change in your life? And after, being through that experience, that's when you have the ability to see things differently, possibilities differently, and be able to change the way that you see things. So it's like, I'm good. I am like enjoying the post work.
That neuroplastic state that you're describing 8 to 10 weeks out for sure is my favorite part. This is, I think, why you and I answered the call last year to, like we always do, try on for size this new consciousness training modality that you and I have been so fortunate, I feel like, to discover and align with some of the greatest conscious leaders that I know that, are bringing these modalities to this leadership development space. So I think it was a year ago when you and I first started talking about this, right? And we went on our first retreat last May together, was the first one that you and I went on. And the modality that we're talking about that we discovered and unlocked was psychedelics. This is a psychedelic retreat that we actually went on last May for the first time. And we didn't necessarily talk about it at that time because we were so fresh and so new into engaging in this modality. But now that we've been a second time, I feel like you and I really feel called to want to share about what it is that we feel like we've unlocked that is so game changer in terms of why we felt, that this was the perfect tee up for the year ahead, right? In terms of setting the tone for 2026. We literally went down there January 4th.
Right.
To the beautiful mountains of Costa Rica, which is definitely part of why this is such an expansive experience, right? Is the fact that we're immersed in nature and all her glory and this sacred land and under the cosmos. I mean, there literally could not be a better backdrop, I feel like, for really starting to access these different realms that the psychedelic therapies help us to access. So let's just recap in terms of when we were heading up the mountain. I think you and I last shared with our audience that we are working on the intentions. I know I shared that I was working on the intention around alignment. And I think it's something that I feel like I do want to talk about in terms of how the psychedelic modalities actually helped me get really deep in my consciousness so that I could actually run that analysis, right? In terms of where I was out of alignment. I've been sharing that 2025 was a bit of a gauntlet for me in terms of a lot of, I would say, cataclysmic level change, meaning that it was completely unexpected and and disruptive. And I think that's why we've been talking so much on the show about the importance of being able to engage in consciousness training that helps us work with those intense energies. And that really is what psychedelics does for me. And I want to hear from you in terms of your experience with this. But I think what's so game changer about adding psychedelics to your processing is that it really helps you to get deep into the somatic aspects of your healing and your growth and all of that in terms of being able to really, what psychedelics do. And we've had quite a few experts on our show that have talked about this in terms of the science, but it helps our protector parts to go down. It helps to disarm some of those parts of our personality that are run by our ego that might be preventing us from being able to actually work with some of those darker, denser energies that can obstruct our growth, right? And can constrict our cognitive capacity to make new choice. And I think that's what's so powerful for me when I'm working with these medicines is that it really helps me get beyond the protector parts and into these exiled parts of my experience that unlock so much when I'm able to transmute those energies somatically in my body. I think, that's where all those resources really start to open up. I always talk about that on this show, right? In terms of the creative capacity, but that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about wanting to get to the helm, right? Is like, I really want to make sure that I'm understanding where there are aspects of myself that, maybe I can't connect with or experience in real time when I'm not with these medicines. And so that very much was my experience and the ceremonies that I went through was like really being able to work with, the impact emotionally of some of those changes that were so disruptive and so cataclysmic so that I could actually start to reconcile with them. And what that means to me is really taking all of that pain and seeing that it wasn't necessarily something that was just useless in terms of something that was happening to me, but I could actually see why all of that was showing up for me. And that unlock in our energy, when we're actually able to get to that step of depth in terms of finding that hidden intel, in those experiences of pain, I think that's where we can actually really start to transmute that energy into purpose. And I think that's what I found when I was able to get into that higher self perspective, because this is the other thing I love about psychedelic medicine, right? Is that if you're understanding what I'm saying from a psychological standpoint, it puts our protectors down. So that's the ego that's trying to protect us, right, from the intellectual level. But when our protector parts go down, our soul comes up. That higher self perspective in terms of that voice of truth and that voice of wisdom. And that to me, when you're able to not only access that and unlock that in your energy and in your experience, if you can integrate that, and that's what we're talking about in terms of this 8 to 10 weeks after the retreat, you know, where we're starting to make new choices and really starting to stick the landing on some of these new habits of behavior. What we're talking about there is we're starting to really bring that higher self most aligned with our truth and seeing the wisdom of why all of these things showed up for us. That's where we're most powerful. You know, that's where we're most impactful in terms of our ability to consciously be at the helm and lead real-time decisions that are actually in alignment with that purpose we found, right? By getting all the way down into the depths of the basement where the pain lives. And that ultimately, I think, is where we want to be as conscious leaders, right? Is really understanding that everything that's coming into our experience is coming into our experiences for the purposes of our growth and evolution. And that perspective is not only so empowering, but there's so much clarity that comes from that perspective. And that's the final piece for me in terms of where I feel like my energy has benefited the most is because, yeah, when we're that clear and that aligned, it makes it so that we actually can live presently, right? We don't have to be living in these parts, this ego that is focused on tomorrow and yesterday, tomorrow and yesterday, and all of that that the ego does to try to control our way through gauntlets of change. This is now where we get to now just be at the helm, present and available to what is showing up in our energy, right? And seeing all of that as an opportunity to like make aligned decisions that are going to have an impact in terms of the purpose of why you're here and why you're experiencing all that you're experiencing as a soul.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my riff in terms of where I feel like I've been dying to share all of that perspective with our audience. You know, the last thing I want to say before I pass you the puck, Trace, is yeah, this has been my commitment ever since day one of going on this mission in my business to try to change the way the game's being played is always to continue to experiment with the, you know, up and coming, you know, head of the pack types of methodologies and modalities. And I know hearing about psychedelics for some corporate people can be like a really scary kind of unknown place if you haven't done your research and you haven't learned about just like how much science is actually behind these medicines. There's no way you and I would have ever even engaged in experimenting with this unless we'd gone on a pretty deep and thorough research journey ourselves. But yeah, I think for me, where I stand 20 years in is like, for sure, this is something I'm going to continue to work with and integrate into my own leadership development practices because yeah, the step of depth that allows us to get to in terms of our mindset, I have not found a modality that helps me get that deep somatically, unconsciously, right? And to therefore have as great a level of shift or transformation that I've experienced and watched my clients experience, because I've been taking clients on these retreats too. I mean, that's all the evidence I need to know that this is absolutely, yeah, a modality that any conscious leader would benefit from being able to access and work with. What are your thoughts, Trace, in terms of like what called you to experiment with this with me and just a little bit more about that backstory in terms of going in?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think one of the things I just want before we go on to that is one of the important things that, you know, we talk about and we've learned from some of the experts is that, you know, the psychedelics is really a catalyst. It doesn't fix us going through that process. It's like when I said, you know, I'm in a good place right now, but this is where the work begins when you get home. And, but what's changed is that you have the capacity and the resources to do the work and the willingness to do the work. But the actual experience itself is just really shows you what you need, where you need to do the work, and allows you to emotionally embody the feelings that you're looking for, possibly whatever your intentions are, whatever you're working on. but allows you to feel that feeling that possibly you would never be able to feel without even being able to meditate very deeply or to have that experience, right? Because those protector parts drop and you can allow yourself to feel certain emotions that can never come up without that medicine, right? So I just wanted to put a little bit of spotlight on the fact that it's really a place to show you, and it's a catalyst that kind of helps you, but then that's not where the buck stops. Then you go home and the real life begins and all your learnings are there. And then you've got to bridge that gap on how you change and shift the way that you want to show up or whatever intentions you were working on. I think it's very particular to people. So I just wanted to kind of plug that it's an experience, but the 8 to 12 weeks after what we talk about, the neuroplasticity, is really where the work happens. And that's where, you still feel good, but it's an amazing experience because you can actually access the pieces that you need to do that work that you're trying to, whatever intention you had set or whatever came up for you in the medicine that you needed to do work on. So yeah. And I was going to ask you before you went on to me was, what are some of the things that you have been working on, maybe that you can share with the audience in terms of, so that we can put it in practical terms for them. And I haven't been sharing mine either after, but what are some of the things that maybe you're practicing every day or trying to make some shifts from?
I think, yeah, why I was so focused on alignment coming in to our ceremonies at the start of January is because I was very much aware that the rate of change last year was so accelerated that, I was showing up to them. I was adapting based on, what I could control. But it sort of had me out of alignment just in terms of feeling like that was a choice, Like sometimes when we have to adapt in real time, it can feel as if there's no choice. And when it feels like there's no choice, that can leave us in a maladaptive deficit, right? In terms of, and when it's happening so fast, sometimes you just got to stuff those feelings back there to deal with them later, right? And sometimes, we can become unconscious to how all of that is starting to restrict our energy. So I think I started to have a sense coming down the pipeline in like October and November that I had some things to clear, and I couldn't really put my finger on it because it had all happened in such an accelerated way. So I knew I had some things to dig out of the backyard. I could intuitively feel that was pushing me out of my alignment. And so, I think some of the themes that I found was in and around self-betrayal. I think that was the big piece that I found in my second ceremony, where it actually helped me see I needed to forgive a lot of maybe some of the external factors where my conscious mind was wanting to focus in terms of those changes where I had no choice. But where that landed me was an understanding how I was sacrificing myself in the process by actually not understanding my role in any of that. I wasn't getting deep enough in terms of seeing where, why these things were happening for me, where I was giving my power away, where I'll just even use the example of my mom. Brooklyn and I had to take my mom in to live with us this year because she's at the end of her journey, and of course I showed up to that. Of course, I'm that person, for my mother. And I think that that's a beautiful choice and it's aligned with my values. But I think, if I'm not seeing that as a conscious choice, I can fall into a space and place of self-sacrifice and then resentment. And that's absolutely not something that is going to serve me or her or the purpose of this assignment in terms of bringing her in, for this last chapter of our book together as mother and daughter. And me understanding how to, just hold that alignment in terms of making sure that I see that as a choice that I wanted to make and why I wanted to make that and the opportunities that are buried in that. And also something you and I talked about in Costa Rica, realizing that, there's always choice in terms of how I show up to that assignment, right? Meaning that I don't just have to just sacrifice my way all the way through, right? Like there are certain things that I can control that can help to make sure that we're both getting the most out of this experience in reciprocity. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think that that's, man, that is such an empowering thing for any mother of either side of this sandwich generation,
Yeah.
because I think that's something you and I talk a lot about with our kids. There's
Yeah.
a lot that we have to show up to there. And if we're not conscious about making those choices from a place and space of alignment with our values, then we can sometimes fall into our parts in regards
Right.
to people pleasing and caretaking. I think you were even talking about that on the show before we went into Costa Rica, in
Mm-hmm.
fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's where all of this is so game changer, right? Is to come off of
Mm-hmm.
that mountain and to be very, very conscious about the fact that I'm deciding I'm not going to sacrifice myself in this assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even that energy shifting in my home has made it so that I have more resources to give to the assignment.
Exactly.
Just even that perspective and coming from the right energy changes oh so much in terms of our daily autopilot.
Totally.
A lot less drainage in terms of like how I feel post retreat
Yeah.
versus how I felt going in. Like, how am I going to sustain,
Yeah.
this on top of everything else that I'm showing up to that's changing oh so quickly in real time, in my
Mm-hmm.
business, with my daughter going to high school. It's a lot for
Mm-hmm.
one woman to be able to regulate her way through. So I think that's a wonderful example, and I'm glad you asked,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's just one that I feel like us working moms and working women, there's just a lot of things we just unconsciously decide we have no choice in and around.
Great.
And that's giving our power away,
Yeah. I love
you
it.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think
So,
it's important to give the practicalities to the audience around like what we're shifting in our life so that the results and the outcomes are there, right?
mhm.
And we're holding ourselves accountable. And we even did that in Costa Rica, was to hold ourselves accountable to working on the top three things we wanted to work on, right? So yeah, I think
Mhm.
it's good. Yeah. So in
Yeah.
terms of, my experience, I think it was I went in with some intentions around working on self-love, something that I haven't done a lot of work in that space. I would say you and I have tried. You try to help me get there, but it was really hard. A lot of protector parts, and so it just took me a lot longer to get there. And I never really got there completely. And so obviously the retreat helped me with that, right? So like I talked about a little bit earlier, is that the embodiment of the emotions that you can never feel in a day to day, because of the protector parts being there to kind of make sure you're safe and not allow you to feel those things because you're not capable, like you've never maybe felt it. Those are kind of the things that for me were pretty magical in terms of my experience, is like being able to feel that, also being able to see things that are happening for me, and having compassion for things around me and gratefulness around things that are happening around me that I kind of never really kind of took inventory on, just because it was kind of like that's just the way it is. But being able to see things that I generally wouldn't see because of my conditioning, being able to take the blinders off and really kind of soak and sit in it,
Mhm.
allowed me to like really have compassion for the beauty that we live in, and the people in our lives, and the relationships we have. And yeah, so for me that was like my big kind of, I guess, awakening in those sessions. And like I said, just being able to feel it, and then be able to kind of work on going into that. And I think you and I both kind of got thrown into it after the ceremonies. We did a post retreat, so everybody knows we kind of wanted to integrate some of our learnings. And yes,
Mhm.
we had a very good opportunity to do that. So we got this beautiful little place in Manuel Antonio, and we got to go to the beach every day and kind of like journal and work on some of the stuff that we've discovered. And some of that stuff came hard, fast in our face in terms of, we talked about it too, right? It's like, you're so raw, you have no protectors, so you're very open. But, they always say the medicine will show you what you need. And it did. And it continued for a good 4 or 5 days where, one of the things that kept showing up for me was, abandonment. And I've had a lot of that as a little girl. And that just kept coming to me very fast and furious. And I had to deal with it. I had no choice. I wasn't working. I couldn't put it in the back pocket. I was not in my home. I was in places and it was just coming at me. And yeah, that just kind of made me have to work on it. And let me get a little bit deeper around why that's happening to me, and understanding and making that correlation to that little girl that, maybe not intentionally parents did, but did leave alone a lot. And, why I feel sometimes abandoned, and I had different words for it before, but then I was able to actually crystallize it after and really make that correlation that it's not about all these other things that I thought it was, like emotions that I thought I was having. It was actually, I was trying to understand why it was happening. So I was trying to get to the root cause, and I finally got there. And it's really about associating that with being left alone and being different and being not part of the stream. And so, yeah, so I did, you and I both talked about that when we were down there, and I had a lot of work to do on that, and I still do. It's not done, but, again, being able to, have the opportunity to have that time to, well, first of all, to have the opportunity to have that come at me for me to solve, so that I can actually resolve that for the rest of my life and not feel like that, like, is like, that's magic. That's perfect. And then, yes, it's hard. And yes, I have to do the work, but like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to grow, right? We're all here to learn and grow and evolve. So hell, it just came to me and like, hey, let's go. And it was hard. And, you saw me in probably worse states, and it was hard, but, I know what it is now. So now it's just about working on it. And when I think about, like, when we talk about consciousness and conscious leadership, and think about like a year or two ago, like how unconscious I was to these things that I was feeling, or, triggers or whatever. I was like, just been able to figure so much out that I understand where it comes from. So then I know what I need to resolve, which is to help that little girl not feel like that. If I can get there, then, then I can move forward and not, it's probably always going to be something that will be sensitive to me for sure, but at least I understand it, and I can understand that what's happening in front of me is not actually the story. It's actually tied to something completely different, which is about me. It's not about what's happening externally, because everything that's happening externally is normal. This is about me and my past and my kind of, childhood. For me, it's, in this case, it's my, some experiences that I've had and conditioning that I've had as a little girl. So, yeah. So when I talk about it being a catalyst, it's just like, if you work hard and do your intentions, and then you can be awakened to things that you're asking to see, to get help on. And then it's about doing the work after, so that you can be a better human and live much a happier life, because you've resolved some of these things that are holding you back. So that was, for me, it was like the big thing. And then it's still like, takes a lot of work, and still working on all that stuff. But I think that modality allows you to go that deep, where you and I've worked on it from a mindset perspective. We got to some places, but we didn't get that. We couldn't get to that root, and it's easy because, as a person, you just say, yeah, I'll work on it. You've given me lots of homework, and yeah, I'll work on it, but I couldn't get there, and I didn't want to go there. But the beauty of like working with medicine is you don't necessarily have an option after you start.
Yeah.
She will show you what you need to see, and that's what you need to feel those emotions and to get deep into that realm, so that you can actually do the work. And so, yeah, it was, it's powerful. It's like, for me, has become something that, an amazing tool to use in my life to help refine things that I want to change. So yeah, I think that, like you said, I think it's something that, I will continue to invest in myself because it's important for me. It's important for my family. I see how different I am and how emotionally more available I am for my kids. Who doesn't want that? And everybody has choices to do it whichever way they want. This is one modality that we want to share with everybody else because it's been magical in our lives, right? And it's changed the way that we're showing up. And when we talk about conscious leadership, and we talked about this at the beginning of the show, we will go down rabbit holes and we will try anything. And that's the beauty of you and I together, is that we want to grow and we will investigate and look at everything. And this has been, a modality that's been really powerful for us, I think. So, we want to make sure we get it out there to our people. And if it interests anybody and they're looking and they have questions, we can, I'm sure you'll put in your show notes a bunch of references of people that, we've interviewed and talked to that, we work with that could be supportive. Yeah, it's been good. Still lots to do, but yeah, we're on the right track.
I definitely agree. I think it's like it's almost like AI in the healing space and the growing space and the leadership development space. You put these intentions in to your conscious mind, and the way that these medicines work with your intentions, I think, to me as a scientist and a neuroscientist, like for me, that is the most fascinating part of working with this modality, is just the intuitive intelligence that it unlocks in terms of being able to really see the lessons that you're being dealt and to get to the core of the why. That's the hardest part, right? In terms of us doing this work in our day-to-day lives. But I think, to have all of that, it's wisdom that is distilled, right? When you come out of these ceremonies with all of what we just described. And then the neuroplasticity that we're referring to for 8 to 10 weeks afterwards, like what that means is like you can actually start to integrate that wisdom in and around you making these new choices. And that is where the transformation lives. That's where you literally are becoming a more aligned, authentic, true, empowered version of yourself. What leader doesn't want that? As somebody who's trying to be progressive in this leadership development space, because, we got to go now in case we didn't notice the energies around us in this world right now. I mean, who doesn't see the possibilities through that portal that we've just described in terms of what we can actually do if we step into this and model this possibility through our lighthouse as leaders, through our model? And all the weight that carries in our homes and in our businesses and in our communities. I think that's why you and I are so excited about the possibilities of working with this modality. So if anybody out there is curious like we were when we started feeling that call, you can definitely reach out to Tracey and I if you want to have a more private conversation, one-on-one on the sidelines. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can actually send me an email, susan@elitehighperformance.com. I'm very passionate about having conscious conversations these days with my leaders. So please don't hesitate if you're feeling that call to awaken some of this consciousness in your lane. We'll leave all kinds of other resources in the show notes because, we're also very committed to making sure that anybody who's curious to learn about these modalities is doing that in the safest, most efficacious way possible. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and following along on this new evolution of our journey. Some might call it a revolution. Stay tuned for more on that. I keep dropping little seeds in regards to some of what Tracey and I are concocting in the lab of, just co-creating this next conscious leadership aspect of our missions together. So stay tuned for more news on that. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out this locker room door. And please, if ever there was an episode to share far and wide, surely it would be this. We really believe that, this type of consciousness training holds the power and the potential to change the way this game is being played. So please get this out and help us spread the ripple effect. That's it. That's all for this week. We'll see everybody back here in the locker room next time.
you.